Thumbtack presents the ins and outs of caring for your home. Out. Indecision. Overthinking. Second-guessing every choice you make. In. Plans and guides that make it easy to get home projects done. Out. Beige on beige on beige. In. Knowing what to do, when to do it, and who to hire. Start caring for your home with confidence. Download Thumbtack today.
Renew your health and wellness purpose this new year with The Reset on Alo Moves, a curated weekly program of Pilates, strength, and step goals to kickstart your fitness journey. It's a 30-day week-by-week program, 3 days of Pilates, 2 days of strength, and 8,000 daily steps, plus bonus nutrition tips from Sakara. Plus, for only $99, you get a year's worth of access to Alo Moves on-demand, full studio experience wherever you are. Get moving today at alomoves.com.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
Doors closing.
Morning, Allie. Looks like you made it without running into any police dogs or crazy homeless people.
Yep, though I gotta admit, I'm still thinking about that guy from yesterday who thought he was Harry.
I mean, once you've been introduced to Harry, it's hard to forget.
So, what weirdness are we in for today?
This is Oak Park. This is a Blue Line train to downtown and O'Hare.
Told you already, I'm not going to do it. It's over. Don't you get that?
Uh-oh, here we go.
Is he talking to us?
You think you could just come back and act like nothing happened? Like I'm supposed to just forgive everything? No way!
Oh boy.
He's having quite the conversation with nobody.
You don't understand. This isn't how it works.
Cicero is next. Doors open on the left at Cicero. Doors closing.
That was intense.
You think whoever he was arguing with won that fight?
If they didn't, I'm kind of worried for them.
You know, nothing surprises me anymore on this train.
This is Tales from the Blue Line by Auditory Anthology.
It took a lifetime to find the person you want to marry. Finding the perfect engagement ring is a lot easier. At BlueNile.com, you can find or design the ring you've always dreamed of with help from Blue Nile's jewelry experts who are on hand 24/7 to answer questions, and the ease and convenience of shopping online. For a limited time, get $50 off your purchase of $500 or more with code LISTEN at BlueNile.com. That's $50 off with code LISTEN at BlueNile.com.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
What do you have for me today?
All right, this one's weird even for me. A friend of mine, well, actually a producer I used to work with, got an email from a colleague who'd been missing for years. Everyone thought he was dead. And he sends this email saying, hey, check out the lost episode of the canceled show we worked on.
Ooh, now you've got me. Let's hear it.
Mark sat slumped at his desk, staring blankly at the half-finished script on his screen. It was late, too late for him to be working, but deadlines didn't care about sleep. The glow of the computer monitor was the only light in his small apartment, casting eerie shadows on the walls. He sipped the last of his cold coffee, grimacing at the bitter taste. He'd been working in TV production for over a decade, mostly on small, canceled shows that never quite found their audience. One of those shows had been a strange crime drama he'd worked on years ago with his old colleague, Evan. Evan. The thought of him still felt unsettling. They had been close, professionally at least, until the accident. It had been 3 years since Evan's sudden death in a car crash. It was a hit to the production team, but also a reminder of how fleeting everything could be in their line of work. Mark shook his head, trying to focus on his script, when a notification popped up in the corner of his screen. New email. From Evan. His heart skipped a beat. That couldn't be right. It was a mistake, a glitch, maybe, but there it was, plain as day. From Evan Walsh. The subject line was even stranger. I found it. Watch the episode we never finished. You'll understand everything. Mark stared at the screen for what felt like an eternity. His fingers hovered over the mouse, hesitant to click. But his curiosity got the better of him. With a quick motion, he opened the email. The message was brief, just like the subject line. Mark, I found it. The episode we never finished. You need to watch it. Trust me, you'll understand everything. Signed, Evan. Attached to the email was a single file. Lost episode showname.mp4. Mark's pulse quickened. It didn't make any sense. Evan was dead. The episode they'd been working on before the crash had never been completed. Yet, here it was, sent from Evan's old email address. A knot formed in Mark's stomach. Was this some kind of sick joke? He looked at the time. 3:12 a.m. He shouldn't even entertain the idea. He should delete the email, shut his laptop, and go to bed. But something gnawed at him. The email felt too personal, too specific to ignore. He clicked on the attachment. The screen flickered to life as the video file loaded. It was the familiar intro to the crime drama they'd worked on, the same clunky title card and low-budget music. It sent a chill down Mark's spine. The show had never been much of a success, but watching the intro now, years after its cancellation, felt almost nostalgic. Almost. The episode began like any other, dark, gritty, and a little cheesy. Mark leaned back in his chair, unsure of what he was looking for. But as the scene unfolded, something about the main character caught his eye. The character, a grizzled detective, the same archetype they'd used in dozens of episodes, seemed different this time. It wasn't just the way he looked or acted. It was something deeper. The way he moved. The way he spoke. It felt too familiar. Mark frowned. The more he watched, the more the character on the screen seemed eerily similar to himself. Not physically, but in all the little ways that mattered. The way he nervously tapped his fingers, the sarcastic remarks, the cynicism that Mark often carried with him. The character's backstory, revealed in bits of dialogue, was disturbingly close to Mark's own. Personal struggles, failed relationships, even details about past jobs. It was as if someone had written Mark's life into the episode. As the episode continued, the sense of familiarity deepened. The character, now embroiled in a tense investigation, mentioned a canceled show he used to work on, a show almost identical to the one Mark and Evan had worked on together. Mark leaned forward, eyes locked on the screen, his breath catching as the episode continued to unfold. It was becoming impossible to ignore. The main character wasn't just similar to him. He was practically a reflection. The detective on the screen spoke in Mark's voice, moved with his mannerisms, and had the same nervous habits. The character sat in a dimly lit office, much like Mark's own apartment. He nervously tapped his fingers on the desk, just like Mark did when he was thinking. His phone rang, and he answered it with the same irritated sigh Mark used when dealing with annoying calls. Every detail felt unsettlingly close to home. Then came the backstory. The detective spoke about a long-lost colleague, someone who had disappeared under mysterious circumstances. The way the character talked about his old partner was too familiar. The words, the tone, it mirrored the way Mark had talked about Evan after his death. The partner had vanished after an accident, and now years later the detective was being drawn back into their old world by a cryptic message. Mark's heart pounded in his chest. The parallels were too specific. How could this be? He had written parts of the original script, sure, but this wasn't it. He hadn't written this. He knew the plot lines they had mapped out before Evan's death, and this episode wasn't one of them. The detective continued the investigation in the episode, receiving a strange email from a colleague who was presumed dead. Mark felt his stomach drop. This was exactly what had happened to him. The character opened the email on screen, the text nearly identical to what Mark had received earlier. Watch the episode. You'll understand everything. Mark leaned in closer, his pulse racing. It was as though someone had taken his life and turned it into a script without his knowledge. Every event in the episode mirrored something that had happened to him in real life. The more he watched, the more his anxiety grew, the knot in his stomach tightening. The scene changed. The detective was now walking down a street that looked disturbingly familiar. Mark froze. It was the street outside his own apartment. The camera panned over buildings, and he realized it wasn't just similar, it was a perfect match. Every detail was exactly right, from the weathered brick walls to the graffiti on the corner. The detective entered a coffee shop, the same one Mark visited daily. The dialogue shifted to the character's routine, his complaints about work, his disillusionment with the TV industry, and his struggles to finish projects. Mark felt like he was hearing his own thoughts spoken aloud. "This is impossible," Mark whispered to himself. He paused the video, his hand shaking slightly as he did. The screen froze, showing the detective sitting in the coffee shop, staring at a laptop. Exactly what Mark was doing now. He sat back, his mind racing. Was someone messing with him? Had someone found a way to piece together fragments of his life and turn it into a TV episode? But how? This footage had been created years ago. Mark hit play again, unable to stop himself from watching. The episode continued to unravel in disturbing detail. The character's life, his relationships, his fears, it all mirrored Mark's own experiences. But it wasn't just the past. The episode started to reflect more recent events, things that had happened just days ago. Conversations he'd had, places he had gone, even the weird feeling of déjà vu he experienced earlier that week. Then the character received a phone call from the partner who had supposedly died. Mark's blood ran cold. Mark's body tensed as he watched the character on screen answer the phone. The voice on the other end was distorted, but there was no mistaking the tone, the subtle inflections. It was Evan. "Long time no see," the voice said, almost mockingly. The detective in the episode, now visibly shaken, responded cautiously. "I thought you were dead." Mark's heart pounded in his chest. The words, the scenario, it was all too close to what had been running through his own mind. Evan had been dead for years, hadn't he? The resemblance between the episode and his own life was no longer just eerie, it was terrifying. On screen, the conversation between the detective and his supposedly dead partner mirrored a conversation Mark had had with Evan years before his death. Evan had joked about faking his own death to escape the industry, to get away from all the stress. Mark had laughed it off at the time, but now it felt like that old joke had taken on a life of its own. The episode shifted again, following the detective as he retraced the steps he and his partner had once taken together, investigating the locations of old cases. Mark felt a lump form in his throat as the scenes unfolded. Each place the character visited was somewhere Mark had been, down to the tiniest details. The episode seemed to be following a script based on Mark's own life, his own memories. Then the strangest thing happened. The detective in the show walked into an old building, the camera panning slowly over a worn sign at the entrance. Mark blinked in confusion. It was the same building he had been in earlier that day, a rundown warehouse he had scouted as a potential location for a new show. Mark paused the video, his pulse racing. How could this be possible? There was no way anyone could have known he had been there. He hadn't even mentioned it to anyone. He felt a chill creep down his spine as he remembered walking through the empty, echoing halls of the warehouse just hours ago. Shaking, Mark resumed the episode. The detective moved cautiously through the warehouse, just as Mark had done earlier. Every shot, every angle was exactly what Mark had seen in real life. The detective approached a rusted door, the same one Mark had been hesitant to open. On screen, the character hesitated too, but then he pushed the door open. Mark leaned in closer, holding his breath as the camera revealed what lay behind the door. Inside was a small, dimly lit room with an old TV set in the center, static flickering on the screen. The detective approached it cautiously, just as Mark would have. Suddenly the detective froze, staring at the TV. The static cleared, and on the screen was an image of the detective, only it wasn't just the character anymore. It was Mark, his own face, staring back at him through the screen. Mark's blood turned to ice. He hit pause, staring at the frozen image of himself on the screen within the screen. He couldn't tear his eyes away. His mind raced, trying to rationalize what he was seeing. But there was no explanation that made sense. The detective on screen stepped closer to the TV, reaching out toward the image. As he did, the image flickered, then shifted to show the detective's office again. Only now he was empty. The chair where the detective had been sitting, slowly spinning, as if he had just gotten up and left. Mark's phone buzzed loudly beside him, pulling him out of a trance-like state the episode had trapped him in. He jumped, grabbing the phone with trembling hands. Caller ID read, "Unknown caller." His breath caught in his throat as he hesitated to answer. It was just a coincidence, he told himself. The call had nothing to do with the episode. But deep down, he knew that wasn't true. His hand trembled as he hit the answer button. He brought the phone to his ear, but said nothing. For a moment, there was only silence on the other end. Then a voice came through, soft and chillingly familiar. "Mark, you're not supposed to be watching this." It was Evan. Mark's blood ran cold. He nearly dropped the phone as the voice continued. "You've gone too far, Mark. This was never meant for you." "What the hell is this?" Mark finally blurted, his voice shaking. "Evan, you're dead." There was a pause on the other end, and then Evan's voice came again, this time darker, more menacing. "I'm not dead, Mark. Not in the way you think." Mark stood up abruptly, knocking his chair back as he paced across the small apartment. "What are you talking about? Is this some kind of sick joke?" Evan's laugh echoed through the line. It wasn't the laugh Mark remembered. It was hollow, empty. "You don't understand, do you? This episode, this is where it all ends for you." Mark's pulse pounded in his ears. He glanced back at the computer screen where the episode was still paused, frozen on the image of himself within the TV screen. The detective, the version of him, was gone now, leaving behind only the spinning chair. Mark swallowed hard. "What do you mean, ends for me? What's going on, Evan?" "You've already seen too much," Evan replied, his voice a low hiss. "This episode, it wasn't supposed to be found. You were never supposed to watch it." Mark's mind raced as he tried to piece it all together. This wasn't just some lost episode. It was something else, something far more sinister. The email, the video, the eerie similarities. It was all connected to Evan, but how and why? "You need to stop watching," Evan continued, "before it's too late." Mark's head spun. "Too late for what? What happens if I keep watching?" There was a long pause, the silence on the other end of the line stretching out unbearably. Then Evan's voice came through, barely more than a whisper. "You'll take my place." Before Mark could respond, the call abruptly ended, the line going dead. Mark stood, frozen in place, the phone still clutched in his hand. His gaze slowly returned to the screen. His reflection in the paused video stared back at him, an empty, hollow version of himself. Suddenly the video flickered back to life on its own. The detective, or rather the version of Mark, was back on screen, standing in the dimly lit room. This time he wasn't alone. Another figure appeared, Evan, just as Mark remembered him before his death. The two characters exchanged a few words, but Mark couldn't make them out. The sound was muffled, distorted. Then, without warning, the detective turned and walked toward the camera. His face was emotionless, eyes cold and empty. He stepped closer and closer until he filled the entire screen. Mark's breath hitched as the screen went black. For a long moment, there was nothing, just darkness. Then a single sentence appeared in white text across the screen. "Now it's your turn." The screen flickered, and Mark's computer abruptly shut down. Mark sat in the darkness, his computer screen still black, the weight of the final message, "Now it's your turn," hanging in the air like a death sentence. He stared at the blank monitor, his mind reeling. What did it mean? Was this just an elaborate prank? Or had he stumbled onto something far more dangerous? He tried to restart the computer, but nothing happened. The power button flickered weakly before going dark again. He grabbed his phone, scrolling through his email app, searching for the email from Evan. It was gone. There was no trace of it in his inbox or his deleted folder. It was as if it had never existed. Mark's hands trembled as he dropped the phone onto the desk. He couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was about to happen. The episode had shown him parts of his own life, moments no one else should have known. It had been too close, too real to be a coincidence. A sudden sound from the hallway outside his apartment made him jump. The floorboards creaked, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate, approaching his door. Mark's pulse raced as he stood up, heart hammering in his chest. He held his breath, listening intently. The footsteps stopped just outside his door. A moment of silence followed. Then, a light knock. Mark's stomach twisted in fear. His first instinct was to ignore it, to pretend he wasn't there. But something inside him pushed him to move. He approached the door cautiously, every fiber of his being screaming for him to stop. His hand hovered over the doorknob, hesitating. Another knock. This one was louder, more insistent. Mark's throat tightened as he slowly turned the knob and opened the door. The hallway was empty. He stepped out cautiously, glancing in both directions. The corridor was dimly lit, the usual hum of the building's electricity the only sound. There was no sign of anyone. Mark turned back to his apartment, but something caught his eye on the floor in front of his door. A small envelope, weathered and yellowed, lay on the ground. He bent down and picked it up, his heart pounding in his ears. There was no name, no return address, just a faint, almost indiscernible marking on the front. With trembling fingers, he opened the envelope and pulled out a single sheet of paper. The same words from the episode stared back at him, written in neat, careful handwriting. Now it's your turn. Mark's grip tightened on the paper as his mind raced. What was this? Another part of the episode's bleeding into reality? Was Evan behind this? Or was it something else entirely? He stumbled back into his apartment, locking the door behind him. He didn't want to know what was happening, but it felt as though he had no choice. He was being drawn into something he couldn't control, something that was far beyond him. Mark sat down at his desk, staring at the blank computer screen once again. The room was filled with a suffocating silence. His pulse pounded in his ears as he tried to think, to process everything that had happened. But the one thing that kept running through his mind over and over was Evan's final warning. You'll take my place.
It took a lifetime to find the person you want to marry. Finding the perfect engagement ring is a lot easier. At BlueNile.com, you can find or design the ring you've always dreamed of with help from Blue Nile's jewelry experts who are on hand 24/7 to answer questions, and the ease and convenience of shopping online. For a limited time, get $50 off your purchase of $500 or more with code LISTEN at BlueNile.com. That's $50 off with code LISTEN at BlueNile.com.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
Okay, I'm officially creeped out. That was seriously intense, Mason.
Yeah, that one really gets under your skin, doesn't it?
I don't know what's scarier, the episode itself or the fact that this guy was getting emails from someone who was supposed to be dead.
Exactly. I mean, how do you explain something like that?
You can't. It's like some weird alternate dimension stuff, and the part where he starts seeing himself on the screen, it's just unsettling. Like, what if it's not just a show anymore? What if it's real?
That's why it's so freaky, because it leaves you wondering if something like that could ever actually happen.
Well, I'm just glad my job doesn't involve anything quite so existentially terrifying.
You sure about that? Your shift walker story wasn't exactly lighthearted either.
Fair enough. Maybe we're both dealing with some freaky stuff.
All right, so you believe this story, or are you filing this one under urban legend?
Oh, I believe it. I mean, the guy's probably still out there locked in some never-ending episode of his own life.
This is Illinois Medical District. This is a Blue Line train to downtown and
Guess we'll never know, but hey, if you ever get a mysterious email from a long-lost friend...
I'll delete it immediately. No haunted TV shows for me. Thanks. Catch you tomorrow, Mason.
Looking forward to it. See you tomorrow, Allie. Tales from the Blue Line by Auditory Anthology is written and produced by me, Keith Conrad. Your narrator is Darren Marlar. Be sure to check out Darren's award-winning paranormal podcast, Weird Darkness, available at WeirdDarkness.com and your podcast app of choice. If you have a story you'd like to contribute to the series, you can visit submissions.soundconceptmedia.com or just follow the link in the show notes.
Renew your health and wellness purpose this new year with The Reset on Alo Moves, a curated weekly program of Pilates, strength, and step goals to kickstart your fitness journey. It's a 30-day week-by-week program, 3 days of Pilates, 2 days of strength, and 8,000 daily steps, plus bonus nutrition tips from Sakara. Plus, for only $99, you get a year's worth of access to Alo Moves, on-demand, full studio experience wherever you are. Get moving today at alomoves.com.
Hi, I'm Raj Punjabi from HuffPost.
And I'm Noah Michelson, also from HuffPost.
And we're the hosts of Am I Doing It Wrong?, a new podcast that explores the all-too-human anxieties we have about trying to get our lives right.
Each week on the podcast, Raj and I pick a new topic that we want to understand better and bring a guest expert on to talk us through how to get it right.
And we're talking like legit, credible experts. Doctors, PhDs, all-around superheroes.
From HuffPost and Acast Studios, check out Am I Doing It Wrong? Wherever you get your podcasts.
Are you ready to feel the difference of truly hydrated skin? This winter, treat yourself to silky, smooth hydration with Osea's best-selling Undaria Algae Body Butter. Luxuriously rich, but never greasy, this TikTok-famous body butter is clinically tested to visibly firm skin and provide 72 hours of continuous hydration. Experience healthy, hydrated skin with clean vegan skincare from Osea. Get 10% off your first order site-wide with code WINTER at OseaMalibu.com.